Whitley Heights was a neighborhood outside of Hollywood, California that included Mediterranean-style architecture. It was very popular with silent film stars in the 1910s and 1920s and graduated to popularity with film writers in the 1930s. In the 1940s, the Whitley Heights neighborhood came together to make some of the buildings historic monuments, and they succeeded after about 4 decades. Hobart Johnston Whitley, or H.J. Whitley, was born in Toronto, the 7th and youngest son of Joseph Whitley and Eleanor Johnson in 1847. He grew up in Flint, Michigan, right across the border from Canada, and attended Toronto Business College. He became a naturalized citizen of the United States in the 1870s. He moved to Chicago, where he owned a hardware store and candy store. He was convinced of the city plan having one bank and one hotel. He was interested in land development, became a land agent for the Rock Island Railroad, and was elected to its board of directors. He plotted and organized towns along the railroad in what was known as the Cherokee Strip, and when Oklahoma became a state in 1912, he declined its first governorship. In 1887, Whitley married his second wife, Margaret Virginia Ross, and on their honeymoon, they visited Southern California. He was piqued by the climate, and he returned to Southern California to open a jewelry store on Spring Street in Los Angeles. Then he began to buy a lot of land. One parcel, the Herd Ranch, included 480 acres above the Cayuga Valley. In 1889, the purchase was finalized, and he named the property after himself, Whitley Heights. He believed in a strong environment, and he planted 10,000 trees on the parcel and invited 1,000 of his new neighbors to a barbecue. This established him as an early founder of Hollywood. In 1902, Whitley opened the elegant Hollywood Hotel on Highland Avenue along with 2 other investors. He was already a principal in the LA Pacific Boulevard and Development Company. The following year, he erected the first structure in Whitley Heights, a Mission Revival bandstand in the style of the Hollywood Hotel. Looking southwest from this site, one could see citrus groves all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Whitley was convinced that the heavy style of Victorian architecture was out, and he was inspired by Mediterranean architecture for the climate of Southern California. He hired architect Arthur Barnes to tour Europe and study architecture and landscaping, especially in Italy. Concerts were held to entertain prospective buyers of the Whitley Heights tracts. The majority of the houses were built before the stock market crash of 1929. Barnes did not do all of the architecture work himself and instead trained young assistants to carry on his work, and that created homogeneous but homes that had their own personalities. Whitley was quoted in an article in the Los Angeles Times, quote, "Whitley Heights will be my last subdivision. I look upon it as the culmination of a lifetime of development and frankly the most beautiful piece of property I ever developed. I have held it for about 18 years with the idea that it should be my last piece of property work," end quote. Whitley was not being entirely honest with himself because his last development was called Whitley Gardens. It's about 10 miles east of Paso Robles, California. Unfortunately, while Whitley had a fortune in the millions of dollars, Whitley Gardens drained a lot of his resources. And in 1931, he died at the Whitley Park Country Club, so he died at a country club named after himself, on Ventura Boulevard. He was survived by his wife, a son, and a daughter, and he founded more than 140 towns in his lifetime. In addition to Mediterranean-style homes, Whitley dedicated land to public schools, libraries, parks, landscaping, streets, transportation, lighting, and churches. It was for these reasons that his neighborhoods, including Whitley Heights, were so preferred by Hollywood stars. In this image, you can see some of the Whitley Heights homes and their Mediterranean style. They were all light-colored to reflect the high heat. They included natural materials such as stone. They would be facing the canyon for excellent views, and they would have flat facades, again, for lighting and sunlight purposes. Whitley was not alone in his land prospecting at the time, and silent film star Francis X. Bushman, who came from Baltimore, was also involved in prospecting in the area. His original property became Grauman's Chinese Theater. Bushman's neighbors included Rudolph Valentino and his wife Natasha Rambeau, Barbara La Marr, Blanche Sweet, Norma Talmadge, Eugene O'Brien, Mary Dressler, Charlie Chaplin, Louise Brooks, Wallace Beery, and Gloria Swanson. As the golden age of film approached, Bette Davis, Tyrone Power, Carole Lombard, William Powell, Maurice Chevalier, Donald O'Connor, Barbara Stanwyck, and Rosalind Russell would move into Whitley Heights. William Faulkner wrote several screenplays on the Whitley Heights Hill. Other writers in the area were Ben Hecht, James Hilton, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Anita Loos, Peter Milne, and Lenore Coffey. Francis X. Bushman would call all of these people neighbors, and he was a stuntman and strongman, and you can view his stunts in the original Ben-Hur. He actually has a great write-up in the recent issue of Man's World, so I encourage you to check that out if you are interested in all things Bushman. As it relates to Whitley Heights, he was one of the first residents to have an in-ground swimming pool. Villa Valentino was built in 1922, and it was purchased by silent film era heartthrob Rudolph Valentino. It was the first nice home Valentino had purchased for himself in Los Angeles in the secluded and exclusive hilltop neighborhood of Whitley Heights. The address of the home was 6776 Wedgwood Place. The top level of the home had a one-car garage, courtyard, living area in the entryway, and 2 bedrooms with baths. The lower level featured the main dining room, living room, kitchen, and servants' quarters. There was also a swimming pool and a small amphitheater covered with stones in which you could see the canyon, which is now occupied by the Hollywood Freeway. Valentino lived with his wife, Natasha Rambeau, who he married in 1923, in Villa Valentino. They also had a Villa Valentino in Tuscany, which survived, while the Villa Valentino in California did not. Valentino was dedicated to Rambeau. She advised him in his career. She was very artistic, and while they moved back and forth between Europe and the United States, they were dedicated to each other, and when he died, she could not get out of bed for 3 days. One of Valentino's neighbors in Whitley Heights was Barbara La Marr, and it has been suggested that Lamar's son, Marvin, could have been Valentino's. I did not address this in my Barbara La Marr video available on my channel because I don't think it's even possible. Valentino committed bigamy to be married to Rambeau. He was totally dedicated to her, and I don't see why he would sleep with Barbara La Marr even though she was his neighbor. Whitley Heights, including Villa Valentino, was destroyed in 1946 and to make way for the Hollywood Highway. Interestingly, the city of Los Angeles decided to keep the foundation of Villa Valentino, so you can still see it driving through the highway at night.